Hello my friends, welcome back to the channel. It's Nat Walsh. I am using a Woodware stamp and a little bit of paper rose, fun and games products. I've got my make art station here. Now I was going to originally use some painter's tape. Full disclosure, I used it on the back side of this piece of cardstock and it totally ripped it up. I hate tape. I hate it. So we're going to use a ruler to hide off the bottom. The idea, it did morph. It did morph into another slightly different project. There was a project of having some cardstock or something underneath it. But, you know, we went differently. I'm still going to have my line down the bottom. It's not going to be terribly strong definition between where the hearts stop and where they start, but it will do well and truly enough. So I'm used a little bit of the Distress ink, the Tattered Rose, on my hearts, just through the half-tone Hearts by Paper Rose. I'm stamping on some Express It blending card. This is just a bit of offcut that I had. It's like, yep, that will do. And I've got some Memento Tuxedo black ink, which tends to be my go-to. I have a couple of inks that I like to use, but this does tend to be a little bit of my go-to image. I'm going to stamp it down a couple of times. I didn't entirely need to do it the second time. It stamped pretty darn well, but we're going to go for something a little bit quite nice and black and crispy. Okay, we're up close up. I'm going to start with my beard because it is going to be a white color. I'm going to start with the C5, so it's going to be a little bit darker than my normal go-to, but that's all right. We start with the lightest color because what you will do if you get a little bit too crazy town, you will take any darker colors in to, like the C5s, those lighter colors will pick up the dark color if you happen to go, if you get a little bit too excited and go into the darks. I'm using C5, C3 and C1, as you can see there, and O, just to soften that down. I've used little tiny dashes. They're sort of a little bit squirrely, if that's a word, just to give a little bit of texture into my little gnome beard. Of course, you can do lots of different colors, but I went the white, cool, grey tones. My usual go-to skin colors, E04, E11, E01, and going down to the triple O. And it's just pretty much on his nose and his little hands. So his nose, I'm giving a little reflective shadow underneath there, but the front of his nose is going to have a highlight, and sort of the front of his hands. So you put a little bit of darkness down the back where it starts to go into his beard, which is a bit odd in the first place. That gives it an idea that it's not a flat 2D object. I've got B97, 95, and I'm going to go down to a 93. I'm just filling in the darker color around the edges. And I tend to go, if you're new to the channel, I tend to do darkest down to my lightest. And I do that 2 times, generally speaking. I think there's something here, maybe his trousers, that I only do once, I think, if I remember correctly. That's because they're only tiny little areas. It's not too much of a big deal. I personally do this. I find I'm quite heavy-handed with my dark colors, and so I will quite often put a lighter color in first. Now, I know other people that are heavy-handed and they will go light, medium, dark, and then dark back down to the lightest because they're heavy-handed. And that's, I think Kelly Taylor Cards does that. She's awesome. I'm sure a lot of you know her. But this is what I find works for me, and that's the whole point, isn't it? And I've said this before, that try everything, find out what works for you, and then go with that. It's knowing the rules and knowing when to break them. So I will use the darkest color and go down to the lightest color and then go back up to the darkest color. And this is when I decide that I want to, whether I don't want to give him a little bit more shadow or whether I'm happy with what I had. So in this particular regard, I gave him a little bit more shadow on his hat. And where it has where they're drawn that it's sort of a little bit concaved, then that's where I've used that and given him a little bit of texture. So on the left hand side, he sort of goes out and around and then dips in and then out again and dips in. So those two dips in, where it dips in, that's where I like to put my shadow and give a little bit of movement. So I would also give a line into his hat to give the illusion that he's nice and fun. So the reds that I've used, I need to go back to some of these colours. As I said, the blues would be 97, 95 and 93. The yellows were Y35, Y32 and 000. It's possibly a little bit too light, but it worked, it did its job, so I'm happy with that. The reds are 89, R46, R24 and 22. Some of my favourites with that. His shoes, I use the 1/100 pen. C9, C5 and C7 and C5, I should say. I've cut him out. I still haven't got my scan and cut fixed. But I've cut him out with some scissors and I've just gone around the edge with him with some black, just some, I think it's an old Stampin' Up black pen. And make sure you do that from behind too, in case you slipped, which of course I did quite a few times. I'm using the stitch rectangles from Paper Rose. These are cut to Australian card bases, which are half of an A4. And this one is a stitch, so it's got a little bit of detail around the edges. The Gnome Wishes I've stamped, he's going to be sort of a ground. He's going to act like our ground. I've stamped it down with VersaFine because it's nice sticky ink. These I'm stamping with Memento Tuxedo Black again. I've stamped them down once clearly and I'm going to move my little hearts down to the bottom and they're going to form a bit of, a bit of an embellishments, but I am going to fill because I can't help myself. I'm going to add some more. I want to colour my roses. It's going to be the same combination as what we've already used and the same way, basically. The darkest down the bottom. With the ones that are on the side, they're going to have the darkest down the bottom edge, which is along the side there, and with a little bit over the top. The little ones, I don't really go over them 2 times. I think I go the E22 2 times, but that's about it. It's just mainly this darker one because it is a little tiny bit bigger. The last thing I'm going to do is just put some foam on my little Gnome dude. You can see there how I've slipped. And this is the whole point in making sure you go on the back when doing the black around the edges because it just finishes it off. I've got some foam for that. We're going to place him down, trying to make sure he's straight as I can get him. I was going to put a little bit of a mat around the edges, but I thought it was just a little bit too much. I didn't want to cut my panel down any more, so we're just going to cut out this red cardstock that I had. This is Cherry Cobbler by Stampin' Up, and it just has a tiny little bit of an outline around the edges, and that's pretty much all. Foam, mount that up, foam tape, and then I've got a little bit of some smush there. It's not going to come out. This is why I decided, well, we're going to have to put some confetti on that as well some confetti sequins because she ain't moving. I don't know what I did. I'm so good at putting smudges and things on my cards, I tell you. Glue that down, and then that will leave us, the last thing to do is to, well, it's not quite the last thing, to put our confetti on. And then the very last thing, I'm going to put a little bit of glossy accents over my hearts, including the heart that he's holding. I don't really do Valentine's Day with my husband, but, you know, he doesn't really watch my YouTube. This is going to be his. By the time he sees my YouTube, he was going to have the card in hand, so it doesn't matter. If you like what you have seen today, I would be very honoured if you hit the subscribe button and hit the like button, and give it a whack and let YouTube know that I'm not too bad. I'm slowly improving. That's it for my card today. I hope you're well. Take care, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye.